Today we're in the Van Gogh for their brand new show, Prague 1900. It's an incredible show, very large. It takes into consideration everything that was going on in Prague in the arts, book publishing, poster making, sculpturing. It's a beautiful show, much like a couple of the previous ones, Vienna and Glasgow at 1900. And here we really are at the end of the millennium. And like this millennium, there was a preoccupation with death and cults and ideas, and a lot of religious things were going on. So this show brings all of that together and what was happening in Prague. It's a beautiful show, so join us now. We're going to be talking with the curator of this show, Edwin Becker. So join us now for Prague 1900 at the Van Gogh. Edwin, we're here at the Van Gogh for another great show. Could you tell us a little about Prague 1900?
Well, it's a sort of part of a series. We started a couple of years ago with Glasgow 1900, and afterwards came Vienna 1900, and it seems sort of a logical step to the Prague 1900 show. And in fact, I myself was in Prague for, I think it was the first time 6 years ago. It was really, it's of course a fairy tale city, and I was wondering where was all that art. It was kept in depots, it was sometimes installed in some small cloister, so really hidden secrets in fact. And once I discovered a villa with Bilek sculpture, for example, I thought, well, this is really worthwhile to do a great overview of different cultural things. So not only applied arts, also paintings, sculptures, posters, graphics, books, etc., etc. So there were two people helping me in this, Roman Prahl and Peter Wittlich. They are both from the Prague University. And together we made a sort of team and built up an authors team for the catalogue, of course, but also really discussing what are the most important artists and what also are the objects and also the balance between objects and paintings and sculpture.
Now you've taken the exhibit from about the 1890s up through Prague 1900. What was happening in the early 1880s, 1890s in Prague?
Well, you had first, I have to say that Prague was part of the dual monarchy. It's the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And so Prague was like you can compare it with Vienna or Budapest, part of that. Of course, Vienna was the big center, but Prague was not totally in the shadow, and there flourished something like a national feeling during the 80s. There was this tendency to bring up this they call it renaissance, a sort of national renaissance. And one symbol is the National Theatre. All kinds of artists and painters, sculptors, they all participated in this building. And when you go into the National Theatre in Prague to the downstairs basement, then you see all kinds of stones coming from different regions. So it was their cathedral of Renaissance, they called it. And during this sort of neo-style, because it was very historicist, this movement, it looked back to their past, what they thought was typical Czech. After that, there also was a sort of more individual style coming up. There were some artists who thought, well, this is okay, but we have to develop something quite new. And that's what is really important, I think, because Art Nouveau didn't flourish at once. It had really a sort of prehistory. And you can see that, I think, very clearly in the show when you have paintings which look at first sight very academic. There are these funny boys and girls walking in a sort of meadow, or you have this allegorical thing which is called exuberance. And there is some flavor underneath. There is something which is in fact very, very subtle, indicating already that there is a change coming on. And in fact, it was developed by a Young Artists Association, the Manes Group, which was named after Joseph Manes, a very well-known 19th century artist. And this group was, when you can compare it with a lot of other groups in different cities and in different countries, sort of avant-garde group which said, well, we have to quit with all these academic traditional styles and we have to build up something fresh and new. This really avant-garde style was in fact initiated by this Manist Association.
Now this group took different tenets in art. It went away from the old classical or neoclassical styles. It seems to me, as I look at it, it has a kind of an underlying eroticism. Is this typical of this?
Yeah, well, as already our title explains, because our show is called Prague 1900: Poetry and Ecstasy. There was always this, on one hand, this poetical, lyrical mood. You can also see it in the landscapes, for example. This is very soft, and afterwards you have also more coming up a sort of exuberant feeling, and really this eroticism. You see it also with sculptures like, for example, Sturza, Puberty. It's a sort of feeling which indicates that from superficial salon art they are going to the inside. So it's in fact a view inside yourself, and all this hidden. If it may be erotic, sometimes it's also just a melancholy mood, but that comes up, and this influence is really shown not only in the paintings, but also very largely also in sculpture. You have titles like Madness, I said Puberty, but also Melancholy Girl. You have Sick Soul. Well, all these titles already indicate that there's something quite new going on.
And they seem to have a kind of a renewed interest, not only in religion, but also in fairy tales a bit, huh?
Yeah, now there's also, well, partly due to this many Czech fairy tales, which they wanted to revive also, and they, of course, they wanted still to go back to their Czech roots, which they wanted to broadly expose to the public, of course. So on one hand you have this national feelings expressed in fairy tales, and on the other side you have also this tendency to express their own feelings in this kind of fairy tale-like atmosphere. So therefore you have many titles like Springtime Fairy Tale, or Evening Spring, where you see a figure lying. It's sometimes a little bit the influence of allegory transposed to something more personal, symbolic.
And in fact, that's one of the names that was given to them, the symbolist, wasn't it?
Exactly,
and,
yeah.
And they also seem to have a preoccupation with death to some degree, I've noticed. Is that true?
Well, I think this is, well, we call it also this very focus on the transcendence from life to death, which is very typical, not only from Prague in 20th siècle, but also in Vienna. It's really, of course, we call it always a sort of Eastern European feeling, where this emphasis on transcendence from life to death is very, well, it's under the surface, but you always it comes up, and also a lot of artists they themselves killed at a very young age, which is a typical 20th siècle sort of attitude, but also really important in Prague.
So it's something like we're seeing now, some of these death cults and things that are coming now at the end of the millennium, as we say. So it was happening then too.
Yeah, and you shouldn't also forget that there was this typical decadent movement. You have a lot of book artists. You see it in a lot of illustrations that there is this tendency to have. Well, it's sort of Rob's feeling also. You have a Belgian artist, Félicien Robs, which might be known, and he has this combination of eroticism, decadence, and death. So there's always this eros and thanatos, these two things which are coming very close together. But again, this was a group. There were also other tendencies. Well, there was one direction which said, well, this is too decadent, this is too 20th siècle, this is too heavy, to only inward looking, and so they go out and just paint nature as it is, and without any specific inner feelings and inner moods. So there's I mean, the Miners Group was in that sense a sort of melting pot. It collected several artists, and it had no rules. Like that was the most important thing, because the academic style that was specifically divided into genres, into subjects, and so on. But these artist groups felt themselves free to do what they wanted, and I think that's the most important thing about this avant-garde.
About the turn of the century, there was a major influence. A big show came to Prague. Could you tell us a little about that influence?
Well, in fact, there were two shows. First, you have in 1902, you have the exhibition of paintings and, not paintings, I'm sorry, drawings and sculptures by Rodin. In fact, they made already acquaintance with the work of Rodin during the Paris World Fair. Because in 1900 there was this big Exposition Universelle, the big general exhibition where all countries had their own pavilions. And also, although Prague was part of the dual monarchy, they had also their own specific rooms. And well, there they met already Rodin, which was the big hero at the time as a sculptor. And some artists even also get into the studio, and there the first contact came, and he was asked to exhibit really large group, 70, 80 pieces to Prague. And there was built especially a pavilion with nice rooms, nicely installed, and it was really impressive. And I can imagine if you see old photographs, and then you see, well, the Honoré de Balzac placed really in the center. It was a sort of solemn atmosphere. There was something quite, perhaps for an hour it's too bombastic, but nevertheless he was really the sculpture hero in Prague. And after that you see all kinds of sculptors around him working in the sort of same style as he did, and it's very in fact funny to see how in a couple of years all these Czech sculptors had this Rodin touch.
Now the second exhibition that you were talking about.
Yeah, that's the 1905 exhibition, and that's concentrating on paintings by Edvard Munch. And of course, that was a big clash at that time, in 1905 already, for Prague. They were not used to that very exuberant expressionist style, and this very broad strokes, very freely painted onto the canvas. So, and in fact it meant to many people a big shock. There is a really nice article in the same year discussing this Munch exhibition in Prague, and he was even called the violator of a dream. And it gives exactly this two directions, because first it was the dream. Well, the people were lifted up from the social misery through the arts, and then all of a sudden Munch came and he, throw them back into themselves, to reality, and only through his paintings there was really clash between colors and also clash between cultures, in fact. But he was really regarded by some of the younger avant-garde as a new hero. What for them meant for the sculptures was in fact Munch for the expressionist painters.
I noticed as I looked at many of the paintings that you see the outside influences of the Impressionist, of the Expressionist. Kirchner I see in kind of one painting or two. But they seem to make a kind of personal Czech feeling in each of them, don't they? It's not quite like a French Impressionist. It's their own.
No, it's always this. It may be a sort of poetic, but perhaps we can call it better a melancholic undertone. You can call it typical Czech or Eastern European, but what also is very important is that, in fact, a painter like, for example, Jan Preisler, he made the whole development through all phases of very early, more decadent symbolist style towards this new style. And even in his expressionist works, you could call them, for example, expressionist, or sometimes even there are cubistic elements, he remained always very much close to this symbolist feeling. And it's difficult to discuss about symbolism. We once had a symposium. It took 2 weeks to get a definition of symbolism. But what I meant to say is you have always a sort of hidden meaning in these paintings. For example, there's a series by this same Jan Preisler, which is called The Black Lake, which is also hanging in this, expressionist room, if you can call it like that. Which, well, of course, it's a black lake. You see a guy standing naked before a horse, and then you see a big black part of the canvas. It's very flat. It's very decorative in a sense. The colors are very strong. The contrasts are very strong. And what he wanted to say is also that you have this contrast between form and also content, because as a sort of symbol of cosmos, the man is standing there before a white horse, which is purity, but also the horse is symbol of instincts, erotic instincts. So it's constantly playing with symbolic meanings within sometimes an expressionist form, sometimes a more cubist form. But this underlying symbolist mood, that's very important in Czech art.
Now this exhibition is just opening today for us.
Yes.
And tell me when the people can start seeing this and how long it'll be.
Well, this exhibition opens tomorrow, the 17th of December, and it will continue until the 26th of March here in Amsterdam. So it's open all days except for the 1st of January. And then it will travel to Frankfurt, to the Museum of Applied Arts. Well, let's say 80-90% of the painting, sculptures, and also the decorative arts will be shown. And we were very pleased to have a next venue, because I think it really deserves a second place to visit. So people are all welcome here in the Van Gogh Museum or afterwards in Frankfurt.
Well, Edwin, thank you very much. It's a beautiful show. I think a lot of people will find it fascinating to see Prague in 1900. Thanks again.
Thank you.